In just 53 seconds, Ursula von der Leyen placed a classified intelligence dossier on the podium and warned that Russian energy warfare had entered a new and far more dangerous phase. She didn't wait for questions. She didn't soften the language. She looked directly into the cameras and said the words that Brussels has been terrified to hear for 2 years. The European Parliament froze. The interpreters paused. What did von der Leyen reveal about Russia's energy strategy that is now forcing the entire continent to make a decision it has been desperately trying to avoid? I'm standing in the press corridor outside the main chamber in Strasbourg, and I can tell you that what just happened inside that room has fundamentally changed the conversation about European energy security. I've covered EU summits, financial crises, migration collapses, and diplomatic disasters. But the tone in that chamber 20 minutes ago was different. This wasn't the rehearsed confidence of a politician managing expectations. This was controlled alarm from someone who has seen something in the intelligence reports that the public hasn't. The date is February 17th, 2026. The time is exactly 11:09 CET. Von der Leyen called this emergency session herself, bypassing the standard 3-week consultation period by invoking Article 122 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. The emergency powers clause reserved for sudden energy supply crises. That alone should have been the headline. That alone should have sent alarm bells ringing across every capital in Europe. Instead, the mainstream media is leading with weather and sports. I'm not going to let this story disappear into the noise. Von der Leyen's opening statement lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I was timing it. In those 4 minutes, she disclosed 3 things that will redefine European energy policy for the next decade. First, Russian gas flows through the remaining transit infrastructure are being deliberately throttled at a rate of 14% per month, a systematic reduction that began quietly in October 2025 and has been deliberately masked by Gazprom's reporting mechanisms. Second, Russian intelligence operatives have been identified attempting to infiltrate the technical teams of 3 major European LNG terminals, specifically targeting the digital control systems that manage regasification processes. Third, and this is the one that stopped the chamber cold, satellite imagery obtained jointly by French and German intelligence services shows new pipeline infrastructure being constructed in the Kola Peninsula. Infrastructure designed not for export, but for domestic rerouting of gas reserves that were previously committed to long-term European supply contracts. Russia isn't just cutting supplies, Russia is building the architecture of permanent energy decoupling, and Brussels is only now publicly acknowledging what the intelligence community has known since autumn. I'm watching MEPs on my live feed from the chamber floor. The expressions are not theatrical. The German delegation is huddled, passing tablets back and forth. The Polish representatives, who have been warning about this exact scenario for 3 years, look vindicated and furious simultaneously. The French bloc is sitting very still, which in my experience means they are recalculating something fundamental. Von der Leyen doesn't stop at the diagnosis. She comes prepared with demands. She places a second document on the podium, this one marked with the blue and gold of the Commission's official seal, and she begins listing what she is calling the Emergency Energy Sovereignty Framework. This is not a proposal. This is not a consultation paper. This is a directive. The language she uses is deliberate and unprecedented. The Commission is invoking crisis powers under Regulation 2022-1369 to mandate a reorientation of member state gas procurement strategies within 90 days. 90 days. That's the timeline. That's the window Europe has to fundamentally restructure where it gets its energy before the next heating season begins. The specifics she outlines are staggering. She is demanding that member states increase contracted LNG volumes from American and Qatari suppliers by a minimum of 40% by the end of the 3rd quarter of 2026. She is calling for an emergency acceleration of the Southern Gas Corridor expansion, specifically the Trans-Adriatic pipeline extension that connects Azerbaijani gas fields to the Italian grid and from there to Central Europe. She is authorizing emergency state aid exemptions to allow European energy companies to renegotiate existing contracts without triggering standard competitive tender requirements. And she is proposing a joint European strategic gas reserve, a shared storage mechanism that would pool member state reserves under a centralized emergency management authority for the first time in EU history. That last point is the one that is causing the most friction in real time. A joint strategic reserve means Germany and France, which have the largest storage capacity on the continent, would be legally obligated to share reserves with smaller and more vulnerable member states in a crisis scenario. The politics of that are explosive. I'm already receiving messages from sources in Berlin who are describing the German government's reaction as deeply uncomfortable. A Commission insider, speaking to me on background, puts it plainly. She's asking Berlin and Paris to accept a mechanism that limits their sovereign control over their own energy infrastructure. That is a very large ask, even in a crisis. But von der Leyen is not asking. That's the crucial distinction. She is invoking emergency powers that give the Commission direct authority to compel compliance. This is European federalism in its most assertive form, deployed under the pressure of an existential energy threat, and it is happening faster than anyone predicted. The markets are already reacting. European natural gas futures spike 8.3% in the first 12 minutes after the speech begins leaking. TTF benchmark gas prices, the standard measure for European energy trading, jumped to levels not seen since the peak crisis winter of 2022. Energy stocks across the continent move in opposite directions, with LNG infrastructure companies surging, while traditional utility companies linked to legacy Russian supply contracts collapse in real time. I'm watching the Bloomberg terminal on my colleague's laptop, and the numbers are moving faster than the journalists can type. At 11:34 CET, the first formal objection comes, not from Hungary, which everyone expected. It comes from Austria. The Austrian Chancellor's office releases a statement describing von der Leyen's emergency framework as legally questionable and economically destructive. Austria has historically maintained some of the deepest institutional ties to Russian gas infrastructure in Western Europe, and the implications of an enforced reorientation are particularly severe for Vienna. The statement goes further, warning that any forced renegotiation of existing supply contracts could expose Austrian energy companies to billions of euros in breach of contract liability. Von der Leyen's response, delivered through her spokesperson 30 minutes later, is direct and unequivocal. The Commission's legal authority under crisis regulation is established and unambiguous. Member states who believe their national interests are in conflict with Commission directives have the option of challenging those directives at the Court of Justice of the European Union. That process takes 18 months. The energy crisis we are addressing has a 90-day window. I suggest member states prioritize accordingly. That is not diplomatic language. That is a declaration that Brussels is moving forward regardless of objections, and that anyone who wants to slow the process down is welcome to try, knowing full well that the legal timeline makes obstruction effectively impossible in the near term. I'm speaking now with a senior energy analyst from the Bruegel Institute who has been watching this session from the gallery. She tells me the supply gap von der Leyen is describing is real and the timeline is not exaggerated. We've been modeling this scenario for 18 months. The Russian throttling strategy is designed to hit, at the moment, European storage levels are at their seasonal low point, which is February and March. What she's describing isn't a future threat. It's a current emergency that has been building quietly for 4 months. She pauses, then adds something I find particularly chilling. The LNG expansion she's demanding is physically possible. The infrastructure exists or is under construction. The contracts can be restructured, but the price Europeans will pay for that gas, especially under emergency procurement timelines, will be substantially higher than anything we've seen outside of the 2022 peak. We are talking about a significant and sustained increase in household energy costs across the continent. That is the political reality nobody in that chamber wants to say out loud. And there it is. The piece of the story that connects the institutional emergency in Strasbourg to the kitchen tables of 45 million European households. This isn't abstract geopolitics. This is energy bills. This is heating costs. This is the price of petrol and the cost of manufacturing and the margin between a small business surviving and closing. Von der Leyen is asking Europe to pay a premium for its security, and the question nobody is answering clearly yet is how much that premium will be and who will absorb it. The session is still ongoing as I file this. Von der Leyen has been in the chamber for 2 hours and 17 minutes. She has not taken a break. She is answering questions from MEPs with the same controlled precision she brought to the opening statement. But I can see the strain. The jaw is set tight. The water glass is being refilled more frequently than protocol usually requires. This is a leader who has been carrying classified information for weeks, possibly months, and has finally reached the point where silence is no longer an option. Russia calculated that Europe would never fully decouple. Russia calculated that economic interdependence, political inertia, and the sheer logistical complexity of restructuring continental energy supply would prevent any decisive action. What von der Leyen just demonstrated is that the calculation may have been wrong. The machinery of emergency powers is now moving. The directives are being drafted, the contracts are being reviewed. Whether it is enough and whether it happens fast enough is the question that will define this continent's winter. I've been in this corridor for nearly 3 hours now. My phone hasn't stopped. Sources from Paris, Warsaw, Rome, and Berlin are all calling with the same question. Is this real? Or is this political theater designed to justify the Commission's expanding authority? My answer is the same to all of them. Look at the satellite imagery she referenced. Look at the Kola Peninsula construction data. This is not a manufactured crisis. This is a real one that has been deliberately downplayed for months because nobody wanted to be the person who said it out loud. Von der Leyen said it out loud today. In 45 European capitals and in millions of living rooms where energy bills have become a monthly crisis, people are about to understand what that means. The era of cheap Russian energy is not just over. It was weaponized, and the response from Brussels, whatever its politics or its methods, is finally proportionate to the actual scale of the threat. The clock that matters now is not the one on the chamber wall. It is the one counting down to the next heating season, and it is moving faster than European politics allows.